Like when you think about Kyle Dubas' era here in Toronto, how would you describe it?
Oh man, I mean, there was a lot of hope, and just didn't get enough results, And I don't put that all on Kyle's shoulders, but ultimately he's the one building the team, as he said on Monday. He doesn't need to be shielded. He's responsible for the roster, and it was quite evident that he was disappointed that they didn't have more playoff success. But he was entered the league as one of the youngest general managers in NHL history, and I think he acquitted himself very well. I think that he's going to go on and have a long and successful career somewhere else when he's ready to work elsewhere, because I just think that he has the right touch, but he was obviously learning too. And as anyone in any job, there's some mistakes in there and things that I think that he was getting better at. And that's why if I was in the Leafs shoes, as I think MLSE was, I would have been willing to keep betting on him to grow and evolve and change and find solutions for this team. I by no means do I think he was out of answers, but I think the toll of the job obviously was difficult on him, and as he mentioned, his family. So, I think it's a good tenure, but there's going to be a little bit of what if attached to it, especially if someone comes in now and the bottom falls out. I mean, I don't think that that's impossible, even with as many good players as the Leafs have. There's a lot of big decisions looming here, and I think making the correct ones with when it comes to the big players or even their next contracts is so important, and it's not an ideal position to be starting from.
CJ, so many unknowns. I can't think of a moment with so much uncertainty around what is, as you point out, a very accomplished club when it comes to the regular season, on 111-point season, and a string of great seasons in the regular season have come to this. But I mean, where do we even start here when it comes to the uncertainty? Let's start on the bench in terms of behind the bench. Obviously, Sheldon Keefe is tied to the hip of Kyle Dubas. They've been a package deal going back to the Sioux, onto the Marlies, and now in the NHL. I guess the safe bet would be Sheldon Keefe ain't coaching this team if Kyle Dubas ain't managing it. But how do you see the coaching situation in Leafland if you were speculating in the lead up to Brendan Shanahan's 3 p.m. press conference?
Well, I think that likely we're talking about a new head coach too.
Right.
The best odds I would have thought for Sheldon Keefe staying would have been Kyle Dubas staying, because even on Monday he laid out some things that he saw that he liked, even in a losing effort in that series from the coaching staff. I think the easiest thing for someone new to come in and do is to look at a coach that's had 4 playoff teams and only had the 1 series victory and decide to make a move there. Now, I'm not aware of any decision having been reached yet, but I think that that's probably the most likely outcome. I think it was still a possibility even had Kyle Dubas stayed on. And so, it's going to be a lot of change. I mean, the team has 10 unrestricted free agents. There's going to be a new GM, I would presume, a new head coach, assistant coach, Spencer Carberry is interviewing for other NHL head coaching jobs. He might be plucked away. I mean, it's looking like a lot of turnover here, this summer for the Leafs. And I do think that you're going to see the new GM get a chance to pick his coach.
In conversation with Chris Johnston, our TSN hockey insider, the breaking news of the hour is that Kyle Dubas will not be back as general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs. We're talking about coaches and potentially having them, who could be the next man up for the Maple Leafs. I mean, if a veteran is what they're potentially looking for in a GM position, could they be looking for a veteran behind the bench as well?
Man, it's too many hypotheticals down the road for me.
I know.
I don't know who's making the call, right? I mean, I think it would be much easier if I had a sense of who the new GM would be. I suppose there is a world. I mean, if it was someone like Brandon Pridham that would get promoted to the GM's job, I mean, maybe Sheldon Keefe could even stay. I mean, I think that there's a lot of ways this could go. The fact it's so up in the air, though, really speaks to how damaging and devastating that this most recent playoff loss was. I mean, if we hadn't been having this, discussion after the Leafs beat Tampa before the second round started, I think, we would have thought that might be enough to secure some jobs, to kind of reinforce what the program was doing. And then just the way it all fell apart so quickly has left all these questions up there. So, I would think with how important the season is, you probably wouldn't roll the dice on a young coach. But ultimately, until I know who's making that decision, I can't say that with too much conviction.
Yeah, and look, I know we're going to keep rolling with some of these tough questions here, but, do you think that, with this firing, does this have and any impact on maybe what Auston Matthews' decision could be going forward?
Well, I think what it will probably do in Austin's case, not necessarily that he doesn't want to stay, but he might be less inclined to sign July 1st, right? Because, if he's going to commit to the team, he's going to want to see how the dust settles a bit. I think that's a fair kind of assumption here. Now, whether the organization is willing to let that happen, I mean, that's I guess a pressure point of sorts. But we're here on May 19th, and they don't have a GM. It's hard to imagine a GM coming in and deciding to trade him before his no move clause kicks in, on July 1st. But I don't think it necessarily spells the end by any sense of the imagination to Auston Matthews' time with the Leafs. I really do believe he wants to stay, but he wants to have some confidence that they're going to be a team that has a chance to compete for Stanley Cup. And with so much up in the air, with so many of these questions, with him not knowing what the vision maybe of the new person is, maybe him or his agent don't know who this GM is, on a first, they don't have a lot of comfort level there. I think all those things, all the moving parts kind of point to, Matthews probably being more inclined to wait and see where the Leafs are at before deciding, what he wants to do with his next move with the contract.
And given that, CJ, I mean, obviously, you hear fans get very antsy at the idea that there's uncertainty around number 34, given that the hardest thing to find in this league is a guy that can put the puck in the net. Given the fact that he may take a wait-and-see approach, I mean, how perilous a road is that to travel for the Maple Leafs, in your view?
Well, incredibly perilous. I mean, I always viewed this as Auston Matthews kind of having the hammer. I didn't see a scenario where you'd want to be trading him. And so as a result of that, obviously you want to work with him. You're going to want to try to massage the number down, whatever that number is, to accommodate for, putting the team around him. But I always thought he had final say. I mean, now he probably has final say in addition to the fact that, it's going to be someone new who's got to sell him on a vision. He's got final say, and he's got uncertainty now about wanting potentially to stay or just not knowing what it is, right? I mean, it would be like you're asking a lot of these questions, like what's going to be of the team? Like Austin, I'm sure, has a lot of the same type of questions, where things are going to go now. This is not the end. I don't think Leafs players leaving on Monday expected. I mean, Dave, you were down there. You heard how so many of them spoke about Kyle Dubas. I think he had strong relationships with a lot of members of the team and important members like Auston Matthews and Mitch Marner and those that have been around for a long time, Morgan Riley. It's extremely perilous. But the thing is, even if they were to trade him in June before his no move kicked in, I mean, for any team to give up what it would take to get Auston Matthews, they'd need some idea that he'd be willing to sign there. And so I think if there's any trade coming, let's remove the no move clause aspect of it. Any trade involving Auston Matthews is going to involve, him getting a say in the kind of places he'd go play, like we saw with Matthew Tkachuk last summer. And so, the organization really is at, I don't want to say his mercy, but I mean, there's only so much they can do with him. And I think still, ideally, they'd like to be signing him.